Availability. There we go. We got a recording going now. So there will be availability for Q&A and chat at the end. Feel free throughout the presentation. If you have a question, we'll be monitoring that, but we will have a formal question and answer session here at the end. So again, thanks everyone for attending today. My name is Ryan Staton. I'm one of the managing partners at StatonWalsh. Have a very exciting presentation for the group today. The topic of today's conversation is driving growth and culture through comprehensive wellness programs. So I will be serving as one of the panelists for today's presentation. We also have some awesome guests here to share some of their expertise in their areas. Pat Isaac, CEO of Capital Services, and Bill Barton, who is an HCM account executive at Paylocity. So with that, we're going to kick things off. And so the natural question, why are we here? What is the point of this presentation? There are some staggering statistics that we see out there in the marketplace today. One of which being that the World Health Organization now acknowledges that workplace burnout is an official medical diagnosis. So outside of your typical stress, anxiety, depression, other things that get talked about inside of workplace wellness, workplace burnout is an official medical diagnosis today. So it's something that I think is a major challenge for many employers. And more importantly, a big challenge is that companies are struggling to grow and maintain organizational culture. And how do we do that? We're going to talk a little bit today about some initiatives and some ways that you can attack that as an owner, executive, or HR manager in your organization. Another important piece is, how do we define a workplace? It's become more challenging now that we've shifted to this, the world of virtual work and a hybrid mentality. And as a result of that, there are a lot of employees that feel less connected with their employers, and more importantly, less connected with their peers, which can present some challenges when we talk about developing and fostering organizational culture. So with that, we're going to kick it off to our first guest speaker, Pat Isaac with Capital Services. And Pat is going to talk to us a little bit about well-being in the workplace. So Pat, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. And thank you, Devin, for the opportunity. Thank you all so much for taking your lunchtime, for most of you, and being with us today. We feel that this is a very important topic, especially today in the world that we are living in. Which has, many, many challenges. So we'll go into the first slide. And what I want you all to do is just imagine for a moment a place where every one of us feels valued, nurtured, and supported in every aspect of our lives, not just as workers, but as complete human beings. A reality is that 58% Americans aren't burdened by work as a significant source of stress, but instead, we can go ahead and actually empower that thought. The reality is that, it's not really a far off dream by any means. It's very, very tangible, possibly when we embrace the importance of employee being. I want to highlight a very important statistics. Did you know that 58% of Americans today demonstrate basically issues of workplace stress? And with many organizations, we're hearing it on the news and we see it all around us. They're losing people. And one of the areas that we see, with many of our clients who are also challenged in the same manner that you are, it's really having a focus and changing the mindset of they're an employee. No, they're a human being. And if we treat them like human beings, it can make a difference in your culture, in the way that they perform, and ultimately your bottom line. So we'll go into the next slide. So, there is obviously a high cost of just neglecting the whole topic and just saying, I really don't care. I'm just going to ignore it. This is a workplace. But by doing that, it's costing employers today about $1,700 per employee a year. There's a huge financial cost to neglect this challenge, this concern, this focus. And it's also, a very crippling opportunity for employers to look at. Like it's hurting a lot of organizations. And the damage doesn't really stop at the dollar sign. It seeps into the fabric of our organizations, corroding company culture, which is very important. It's a brand, eroding the joy of work, and many of you have heard that if you really enjoy what you do every day, it doesn't feel like work. And when people are burdened by not feeling well overall, whether it's, physical, emotional, spiritual, financial, those are stressors, and those are real. And as Ryan mentioned earlier, it is truly a diagnosis today, and there's an actual code now that doctors can use that is, linked to burnout in the workplace. So the next slide we'll go into, let's look at it beyond the financial cost, the human cost, right? So if we take a moment and ask ourselves, what is the human cost of neglecting well-being? As we grapple with the mental health issues such as depression and anxiety, costing the global economy today $1 trillion per year in loss of productivity. We are losing more than money, and we are losing our joy, our health, and sometimes tragically, even lives, as you have seen around us. The heart of every organization today is its people. And when the heart is hurting, the whole body suffers. And I think that that's really important to realize. It goes back to my comment earlier that by treating people like human beings, it makes a difference into the way that they react to not only themselves, but also to the world around them. Next. So, there's obviously evidence out there that having a focus on a well-being strategy for an organization will bring value in so many different ways. So I want to highlight the benefits of investing in a strong well-being strategy, such as increased engagement, productivity, retention, a healthier workforce, and more importantly, what everyone struggles today is the healthcare costs, so lower healthcare cost. So one of the things that organizations will do today is they actually will align in their philosophy, into their employee benefit philosophy, the aspect of well-being. So it's no longer looked at as, okay, we have a sick benefit. No, you have a wellness benefit. And by creating opportunities where, we can actually engage employees into healthier behaviors, what you will find is that you will actually have an opportunity to save cost. You'll see a lower chronic care area in your claims for those of you that are able to get claims, and overall productivity will jump up. There's a Gallup study. I don't know if any of you have looked at it, but that Gallup study basically says that, for investing into well-being reports about 42% lower absenteeism and a 17% higher productivity and 24% of lower turnover. I think any organizations that can find the value of putting in the wellness, and basically the key here is the cost of productivity. It's lowering that turnover. Next. The other aspect is, the future is not set in stone. We all know that. It is really ours to shape. Every dollar we invest in mental health and well-being in our workplace sees a return of about $4 in improved health and productivity. We're not just improving the bottom line. We are truly nurturing healthier, happier lives, creating an environment that sings not to, stress, but to harmony and balance. I think it's important that we consider taking the next step. We suggest, really looking at your organization. I apologize. Sorry. and looking at the opportunity of really putting in simple steps. And sorry, I'm going to just one. Sorry about that. It's putting in simple steps that will go a long way. The key is it doesn't have to be expensive. It's looking at your employees and looking at it in a way that what's important to them. Take a survey, and find out what is important to them. I mean, you can do simple things. We've helped our clients basically set up a room where the employees can actually take breaks in. It's also sprayed with lavender, and they have virtual goggles so that they're able to get away to the beach, to the mountains, wherever they want to. And also sound has a huge effect on well-being. So we call it also a sound room. Those are the kind of things that our wellness professionals within my organizations are setting up today, and really seeing the impact of, how it's lowering the cost of, chronic care in the workplace and increasing that productivity. If we go into the next slide, I'm going to share with you this is, we call it Alpha Organization. And so let me share with you a tale of transformation. So we had a client who we'll call Alpha Corporation. It was a tech startup, and basically found itself mirrored in the consequences of neglecting employee well-being. They were noticing a decline in productivity, overstressed employees. And this was actually shortly after the whole COVID, people were asked to come back to the workplace. So they knew that it was really affecting their bottom line. So what they decided to do is not to wallow in their misfortune, but to change. So they invested into their employees and well-being programs, which we designed for them. And within a year, we actually saw a drop of 25% in turnover and a remarkable rise in productivity. This is, one of many success stories, but the key is really, it's a true testament to the incredible potential that lies in each one of us when we're nurtured, cared for, or valued. Remember, an organization's wealth lies in its health. So I would say it's time to invest in ours. I also, in the next few slides, I've put together, some ideas of what organizations are doing today. And I'm not going to go through each and every one of them. I'm happy to share that information with you and give you some ideas. But the most important thing is that be creative. There are experts, within organizations like ours today that are willing to come in, do an assessment, and put in place 2 to 3 major areas, or, that we can actually see impact and get you all an ROI. I mentioned the virtual reality relaxation room. If we go into the next slide, the other aspect, not everyone can do this depending on your business, but flexible work arrangements. The key to success is that balance, that work-life balance, but there has to be an integration today with work and personal. That's very important to an employee in order to see success. We'll go into the next slide. So as you can see, there are about 10 different solutions here. And I want to wrap it up by the last slide, just by saying thank you all so much for the opportunity to present to you. And in the heart of everything, in every thriving organizations, it's about its people, the lifeblood who gives their time, their energy, and their talent. Let's remember this. We're not merely custodians to businesses, but of dreams, aspirations, and most importantly, lives. As we strive into the future, we carry, we carry with ourselves an understanding that the success of an organization is linked to the well-being of its people. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about profit margins, as we know, or market share. It's about the people who make it possible. It's your employees. So let's pledge today not just to count the cost, but make the cost count. So invest in the health of your employees for the wealth of the organization and a future where individuals thrive. Together, we can make this vision a reality. And I think it's really important that we start today. Thank you all so much for the opportunity. Pat Isaac from Capital Services. Ryan?
Thank you, Pat. And appreciate that insight there and some interesting stuff. I have to make a note. Devin, make a note that we can have virtual reality trips to the beach in the office. That sounds fantastic. So
They work well.
I got some good stuff out of that for myself. So we're going to transition here into the next phase of this, which is really financial related. And as a firm, we work with a lot of companies at the corporate level on corporate retirement plans, also trying to and rolling out some of these financial wellness programs. I think the genesis of all of this really started with a study that we came across, a Gallup study that talks a lot about what is considered a life well lived. And so according to the study, they found that a life well lived required fulfillment in 5 areas of your life: career, social, physical, community, and financial. And so as an employer, in many cases, you touch all of these areas that were covered in this study. Pat talked a little bit about some of the physical and mental part of the workplace is a social environment where people can interact and where many make friends and meet their spouses and things of that nature. And for us, one of our major focuses is how do we round out some of these other well-being programs and really deliver a best-in-class financial wellness program for employees in order to ensure that they feel confident and reduce some of those feelings of stress and anxiety. And so what the study found is that employees that thrive in these areas tend to have higher customer ratings, they adapt to change better, and more importantly, they save their company money in healthcare and turnover costs. I think ultimately at the end of the day, as employers, all of us look at how do we attract and more importantly, retain good people within our organization. And I think that's a key element of the overarching theme of our conversation today, which is building and growing company culture. So financial wellness, I would argue, a fad term in today's environment. There's a lot of HR managers and executives that we come across that use this term. It's coming up more and more. Employees are becoming aware of it. And so the question is, what does it actually mean? And so I'll tell you how we define the idea of financial wellness. Simply put, it's a state of being in control of one's financial life. So it's your ability to meet your current and future financial needs and goals without affecting your overall well-being. So said a different way, being able to live your life, spend money, save money, do anything monetarily related without anxiety, fear, stress, and all those things that Pat talked about when we talk about physical and mental well-being. It's also having the capacity to absorb financial shock. I think we live in a fast-paced world, especially where things happen quickly, and that can be good or bad. COVID was one where we saw things move very quickly, and that was a financial shock to the system. Now, there were some things that we did as a country and as a society to help with that. But ultimately, there were a lot of people that came out on different sides of that, some good, some bad. And so true financial wellness from an employee level is being able to absorb financial shocks and not have that affect the day-to-day of how we're interacting and how we're living our lives. More importantly, it's a holistic approach to managing finances. And there are so many different facets to financial wellness and to financial planning in general. I would argue that true financial wellness ultimately will lead to less stress and more choice, which is important for employees. And it's very important for us as human beings today, is that we live in a world of choice and options. It's kind of the bedrock of a capitalistic society. And so having more choice and more ability to make those choices will ultimately lead to higher rates of success in many aspects of our life. Financial wellness programs aim at training employees in key areas of financial literacy and financial education. One thing that we find in our practice is when we're meeting with people is that they crave more from a financial wellness program. Coming in once a year and telling them how their 401k works is not enough anymore. They want to know about things that have nothing to do with maybe a benefits program that you offer at in-house as an employer. They want to know, how do I buy a car? How do I understand my mortgage options? How do I do all of these different things in my life that no one's ever really educated me on, but has an influence on the way I live my life each and every day? And the last piece, where a lot of people get confused, is that financial wellness is not the same as a financial product. A great example of this is advertising or having a 401k and a match and all these other retirement planning focused vehicles is not enough to satisfy employees' desire for education. There have been tons of studies on this. There's tons of data out there to support this. We've seen it in our own practice in talking and surveying the groups that we work with. There's a craving out there for employees to learn about more, and they want more from these programs. So we'll talk a little bit about why it's important. Some of these statistics Pat already touched on, and I think it's important to reiterate. Stress, anxiety, and depression cost the global economy an estimated $1 trillion in lost productivity per year. $1 trillion. Another statistic that kind of was eye-popping was that 1 million Americans miss work each day because of stress. So there's 1 million people, 1 million of our people out there every single day that are not going to work because they are so stressed that they just don't have the ability to do their job. Financially speaking, about 20 to 28 hours a month are spent by employees researching their financial issues during work hours. So it may not seem like a lot, but when you look at it on a weekly basis, you could have employees spending 5 hours a week, an hour a day even, of time where, as employers, we rely on them to be productive in their jobs, where they're worried about other things. Their mind is wandering elsewhere. And so that could be a problem for a lot of different reasons, but it's a problem that I think, we'll talk about how you can solve as a part of this comprehensive push to really focus on general well-being, financial wellness being one of them. 62% of employees are stressed about their finances. And another statistic that, again, really caught my eye here was that nearly 2 in 5 employees live paycheck to paycheck. And a lot of people will look at this statistic and say, well, many of those people are low income earners. The reality is that there are quite a few. I think it's about 20% of earners making more than $100,000 a year as a household that still live paycheck to paycheck. So no one is really immune from the stresses and the anxiety caused by managing your financial life. And so it becomes a challenge. It becomes even more challenging as your life gets more complex with family and more moving parts. And so this is something that is plaguing many employers, and we're seeing a lot of turnover and a lot of costs, as Pat mentioned, related to the health care side of what this stress and anxiety ultimately leads to. Some other statistics here: 71% of employees say that their finances cause them anxiety. So there's a couple of these statistics that focus on different elements. One is stress, but anxiety, many of these studies found is really the data point that leads people to action, to making poor decisions, leaving an employer, going to their employer and asking for things like more money or for more financial assistance, and ultimately could lead them to leave an employer for the wrong reasons because of lack of financial wellness, for example. 88% agree that inflation and rising costs have increased their financial anxiety. So this is a big piece that gets discussed in media, is inflation in today's world, and how do we increase wages intelligently to keep up with inflation while also allowing the company to remain, efficiently balanced from a financial perspective. So what's the cost of doing that, but what's the cost to your employees? So something very important to consider and address. 54% of employees say that their financial anxiety makes it difficult to focus at work. So that directly relates to that 20 to 28 hours a month that we're seeing that employees are spending on the clock researching their own financial issues. So what are some common concerns? And these are things that we hear or have seen directly from some of the groups that we work with. Number one, I spend more than I earn. In simple terms, cash flow and budgeting. One presentation that we do on cash flow and budgeting is actually the most well attended of the groups that we provide financial wellness services to. It's something that people care a lot about, and some of the statistics that we see on living paycheck to paycheck and working through some of those month to month financial struggles is really an important issue, and it's one that many people may not talk about. So that's number one. This is something that, depending on your industry, can be a part of the problem, but some people have said that commuting costs or car payments are too high. Some of this is a result of, during the pandemic, people moving away from metropolitan areas and now being asked to come back into the office. So this can create some concerns if your income has not changed, but now you have additional costs to potentially be required to commute or show up. This is something that is on the minds of many employees. Too much credit card debt. And in a world of relatively stagnant wages and a rapid increase in prices, when we talk about inflation over the past couple of years, the metrics and data that we see tell us that people are accumulating more credit card debt. And so those are things that weigh on people's minds, and they're looking at ways that they can address those issues. Not having an emergency fund. So this is one that it's a pretty sobering statistic, but there are many people in our workforce today that cannot handle a $500 emergency. They do not have enough cash available in the bank to be able to do that without going into debt. So those are things that weigh on people's minds. And ultimately, I talked about financial wellness and being able to absorb financial shock. That's a piece of this, and that someone is one instance of an accident or something that's completely out of their control from being completely wiped out financially. Increased rent costs. So cost of living in general in many places has gone up pretty drastically. And so again, this goes back into the conversation about inflation and worrying about cash flow and budgeting. Costs of raising children. So this has outpaced the normal rate of inflation by a lot. The USDA does studies periodically, the most recent of which was prior to COVID and really prior to what we're seeing in terms of inflation and cost increases and things like groceries. The average cost of raising a child from birth to age 18, not including educational costs, is about $241,000. So that's a lot of money. I mean, even spread out over an 18-year period of time. For folks that have multiple children in their household, it's a big ticket item. It's one that comes with a lot of joy, but also a lot of responsibility. And so these are things that contribute to some of the stress that employees have, when they look at their paychecks and they look at their expenses at home. Medical bills are another one in terms of what kind of coverages they may have through an employer. Some things are covered, some are not. What are you out of pocket for? And so these are things that and concerns that employees may not come to their employer with, but it's certainly something that they're worried about. And again, it goes back to some of the other items on this list, like not having an emergency fund or cash available to help pay for some of those medical bills. Overwhelming student loan debt. This has been on the minds of many, especially the millennial workforce, for several years. I know there's some things floating out there on how it will be handled, but ultimately a lot of employees are coming into the workforce today with some form of student loan debt. And as a result of that, once those payments start, that puts additional stress on their bottom line as a household. And so figuring out how they can deal with that, how they can manage that moving forward is a big concern. Am I saving enough for retirement? So am I putting enough into my 401k at work? Am I doing enough to that in my own financial life that I can retire the way that I want to, when I want to? And lastly, the most common that we hear is financial stuff confuses me. The simplest way to put it, but it's true. There are a lot of moving parts to planning for your own financial future and even planning for tomorrow. And so understanding all the different moving parts, financial products, how certain institutions work, it is confusing stuff. And so having access to experts and people that can educate you on that can be vitally important and be super helpful and honestly highly appreciated by the workforce. So what can I do about this? Well, let's talk about some other statistics. 80% of employers. So the good news is that the group that we're speaking with today, 80% of you agree that offering a financial wellness program and support does create a more satisfied, loyal, and engaged and productive workforce. So we're all in agreement that this is an initiative that we need to move forward. 69% of employees who were given access to 4 or more tools and resources said that their finances are heading in the right direction. So one common piece of feedback that we'll hear from a group is, if I give my employees more stuff to use, I don't think that's going to help them. It may not be productive. It might be counterproductive. The reality is that employees are telling us different. Those that have more tools and resources feel more empowered, they feel more engaged, and they feel better educated, and they feel confident that their financial future is heading in the right direction. One thing that I found really interesting with the younger workforce is 90% of younger workers said that they would be willing to share personal information with a payroll provider in order to receive money management advice. So sometimes these financial planning tools and financial wellness technology that exists today that you can roll out to your group, some of the concerns are, will my employees actually utilize it? Will they take advantage of it? Are they willing to share information with someone in order to get recommendations in return? And the data from ADP tells us, yes, they will. This is a smaller number, but I think this is a really important one. 30% of millennials say budgeting and savings tools provided by an employer will make a difference when considering a job offer. It may not seem like a big number, but in a tight labor market where we're all competing for top level talent, that 30% could be a huge employee, and they could fill a huge gap in your company because they are the best and the brightest and the most talented. And so the only way to compete for the best is ultimately to deliver the best. So what can you do in your organization today? Most importantly, leverage your existing relationships. You have subject matter experts around you that can help educate the company and, more importantly, the employee pool. Benefits consultants, insurance professionals, financial advisors, 401k consultants. There are a lot of people in your life, payroll providers, people that you surround yourself with and pay today that could be a valuable resource to you and your company. Leverage them. Ask them if there are any services or things that you're not taking advantage of. Offer a more comprehensive education program and resources. So take the next step on beyond, for example, 401k and whatever the provider offers on their website. Look at other options. See if there are other things that can be offered. Either there are resources out there that can be cheaply implemented, and so they don't have to become a large cost item for the company. There are also organizations and nonprofits out there that offer these types of services as well. Get creative with your benefits offering. So a couple of those concerns on that list can be easily addressed. So for example, there are programs where there are student loan matching and payment programs. So some things we see are that people with student loans won't save into their 401k because they want to pay their loans off. Well, there are programs that you can create as an HR professional and as an executive that will allow them to contribute to the retirement account, but also help contribute money towards getting their student loans paid off. Emergency savings initiatives, so putting money into a savings account for employees education savings, setting up payroll deducted 529 plans, for example. There are so many different financial strategies and products out there. I just wanted to highlight a few, but I think the important thing is when you're reviewing your benefits offering and your wellness offering as a whole, it's important to ask specific questions to make sure that you're being as creative as you possibly can and really stretching your dollars that you're investing into these programs as far as possible. The last couple pieces, create a connected and transparent environment where employees can address their concerns. I mentioned on the first slide the disconnection between employers and their peers and this hybrid world of work, and collaboration and connectivity seems to be at an all-time low. And so create an environment where everyone can be connected with one another. And I know Bill is going to talk a little bit about some technology that can be utilized to do that, but it's important to focus on that and not let that get lost in the shiny object of all these different things that you can do. It's still important to bring people together and bring them to the table to make sure that they're taking advantage of this stuff. And the last piece is, if you have any of these things, or if you implement this, tell people about it. One of the biggest misses I see in job postings when I look at stuff that's out there in the world is that people will say, we have benefits, we have a 401k, we have XYZ. It's very rare in today's world that I'll see a job posting that will specifically address wellness programs, financial wellness. Get specific, tell people what you have. Tell your people what you have if they're not taking advantage of it. I think education is critical in this conversation. And if you tell more people about it, they will start to associate that with the culture and the benefits offering that you have as a company. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Bill. So Bill, thank you for being involved. Bill is with Paylocity and is going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we addressed in our portions of the presentation, and get into how can you deliver on some of this and some of the technology that's out there that's helpful.
Thanks, Ryan, and thanks, Pat, as well. And thank you all for joining. My name is Bill Barton. I'm an account executive here at Paylocity. And today I'm going to talk about how technology can really bridge gaps in workplace wellness. And before I really dive into what you're seeing here, I want everyone to kind of think for a second about the simplicity, the connectivity, and the knowledge that you have available in your personal life. So what I mean by this is, from a simplicity standpoint, it's very easy for you to access Amazon right now if you need to buy a new book. It's very easy for you to deposit a check when it comes to online banking. From a connectivity standpoint, you're probably in several group texts with your family members and your friends. You engage with extended family and extended friends via social media. And from a knowledge standpoint, nearly everyone today has a smartphone in their pocket where I can quickly Google where the closest grocery store is, or I can quickly pop on YouTube to learn a new tool or a new trait, right? And the reason I share this with you is, as we look, there's a Forbes study done that by 2025, nearly 58% of the workforce will be made up of Generation Z and millennials. And so it's clear we are on a path to a very modern workforce. And to really put this into perspective, this spring's college graduates were born in 2001. The only phone that they've ever had is a smartphone. And so how does this tie into wellness and workplace wellness? And it's something that looks different across generations. We've got baby boomers, we've got Gen X, we've got Gen Z, we've got millennials. And now we're coupling it with a post-COVID world where a hybrid approach has been taken when it comes to our workforce, or perhaps fully remote. So when we couple all these together, how are we creating resources and processes that are simple and accessible for our employees to truly pull the max value out of? And there's a Gartner study done that shows about 48% of CHROs say that their current HR technology actually hinders rather than improves their employee experience. And all the modern employee really wants is the ability to give input and to make an impact and to access the tools to be able to do so easily. And oftentimes when we relate this back to benefits, we find it's not necessarily the richness of a benefit offering or the tools available to achieve financial wellness, but rather it's the ability to roll it out and to connect the employees to these resources and make it very easy for them to understand. And so as we move to the next slide, I'm just going to quickly go over just a sliver from more of an HR standpoint, just kind of going over the hire to retire cycle and showing just one little area where truly utilizing technology's extent can help make a really good first impression on a new hire, right? And we're hiring folks from a range of generations. And it's a staggering study done by Gallup that shows roughly 88% of employees feel their employer did a poor job with the onboarding process. And I think a lot of this just goes into simplifying communications and transparency across the board. I meet with a number of organizations on a weekly basis, and every time I go to a career page, you know, I can see a job description that's very generic, right? It's very difficult for an employee to truly derive what it might look like to work on a day-to-day basis. You know, perhaps a video from a hiring manager on a job description that really goes into the day-to-day of the job can really help lead to a more qualified candidate, right? Simplifying connection and communication with your potential employees, it can move beyond just the old emails and phone calls. Are we texting with them? Are we adding them to groups with their team once they're onboarded? Are their peers able to interact with them before they're onboarded, before they show up for day one, so they truly feel like they're a part of the organization? It's stressful, right, to look for a new job, and it's our job as HR professionals to really make it easier for them and less nuanced with technology. And am I updating information and different sources, or am I in a one consolidated spot where it's easy for me to interact with my team and to give feedback as well? And so once we have someone onboarded and we move over to the next slide, Ryan, we can really look at the journey of well-being and how it continues from there. And again, we're really seeing this in a post-COVID world, and in a fully remote or a hybrid workforce, 94% of employees feel that their technology could be improved from this standpoint. And how do we use this technology to help them feel more connected to the culture and to drive a level of employee engagement that can help us to continue to grow? So some questions I want everyone to think about is, how aware are employees of the company's mission? How is this constantly pushed out to them, right? Do they feel that they have a strong connection with their peers? Are they able to recognize their peers if they're feeling well, if they feel someone's done a good job? Same with their leaders. Are there avenues for them to give feedback, whether it's anonymized or whether it's out in the open for everyone to see? Is this an environment they feel they can develop in personally and professionally, right? These are all difficult questions to answer, especially when now we have employees in multiple states and different roles, ranging from executives to potential, you know, warehouse workers. And now we have to do it across 4 generations, and most recently a generation that is used to doing everything that they do from their mobile phone. So utilizing a platform such as Community, where employees can gather and they can collaborate in a centralized location, can really help to build that feeling of connectivity that we're all looking for in the workplace, right? If we look at it this from a leadership standpoint, on the left side of your screen, we've got a company announcement from the CEO, right? It's a video that everyone on the team can go watch, and they can see what updates we have to the company's mission. And now as an employee, I'm able to collaborate. I'm able to leave a comment on that, right? As we move on to look at this from more of an employee point of view, you now, if you could jump back, Ryan, my bad. If you look at this from an employee point of view, you have the ability to create discussion groups and discuss your favorite topics. You can see the right side, this discussion group. Here at Paylocity, we have a very, very popular one. It's more play than work. It's a dad's joke group. And so every morning from across the country, we'll post in there. Everyone has a good laugh at it, kind of like a walk to the water cooler, if you will, in a virtual setting. But now as we move more into today and some of the conversations that we're seeing on the news and in the workplace around diversity, equity. And yesterday, there was actually an update to the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act and new laws requiring reasonable accommodations, right? these sort of updates can be pushed out in these discussion groups, allowing your employees to really engage with these topics and create inviting environments to give feedback and to work together. And as we move on, I'm going to bring this back to more of a benefit focused. As you can see here, I've just created a quick mock-up of what this would look like if you were to create a discussion group, let's say, where you have one dedicated to your retirement wellness and you have one dedicated to your overall physical wellness. On the left-hand side here, you can see just a quick snapshot with all these questions that Ryan just brought to our attention that people are struggling with. Wouldn't it be a lot easier if an employee was able to just go and access these tools directly from a mobile app rather than having to go to HR and ask multiple questions, right? And same thing from a health insurance and health benefits side of the house. They're able to engage with the resources that are available to them. More so importantly, it's making it very easy. Technology is great until it's not. It's amazing when your internet goes out or your computer screen isn't working properly, right? So it's about making these tools and these resources that we spend so much time on as HR professionals developing with our colleagues like Devin and Ryan and Pat. It's about how we translate this to our employees and really allow them to maximize what they have available. Over communicate, simple to find, easy to understand. As we move on to the next slide, I just wanted to show a quick example of how a question and answering group, like you've got here in the bottom of your screen right now in a Zoom, there's a Q&A. How about the same thing, right, within your HR system? This is a very familiar environment for a younger generation, right? A younger generation is used to going to Google and typing in their questions, and they're used to more of a self-service approach. They can jump right in here rather than feeling like they're bothering HR. They can post a question that can be answered and addressed. And this can either be anonymous or you can keep it open for the rest of the team to see. And if you decide to keep it open, it becomes sort of like a living document. Before I go and ask a new question, I can go and reference what's already been asked to make sure I'm more informed. And this also in turn allows your team to go and give feedback back to you as an HR professional in a leadership group on what changes we might need to make it easier to understand or to improve. And so lastly, as I round us out here, I think we do a phenomenal job of telling you where you need to focus. We actually have what we call our Modern Workforce Index. And we break it into 3 different categories. There's a utilization score, there's an employee sentiment score, and there's an overall organizational health score. A lot of this is based off of similar companies in your industry, and we give you actionable insights on where you can go and improve tasks. From a utilization standpoint, you can think of things along the side of, are my employees accessing the self-service, or are they coming to me from an HR standpoint to update direct deposit or to fix a qualified life event? From an employee sentiment score, we're going to be monitoring what is said in these discussion groups and what is said in your community pages that are set up, and give you actionable feedback on what employees are saying so that you can go and change something that you might need to improve. Or if your organization has a very healthy culture, how can we continue to expand on that and drive it forward? And what we see here when companies truly buy in to these ideas and truly create an environment that fosters collaboration and communication across their workforce, we see a 25% reduction in turnover and a 24% increase in headcount. So it's very clear from our speakers today that the idea behind wellness, financial wellness, is very, very important, right? And we can truly use technology to bridge the gaps between these wonderful plans that we've put together and how we can really drive it to our employees and allow them to maximize these uses, ultimately impacting the organization as we continue to grow. And that's it for me, Bill Barton with Paylocity. Ryan, I'm going to turn it back to you.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you to our speakers today, and thank you for everyone for attending. So now we're going to open the floor for Q&A. So feel free, if you want to drop any questions into the Q&A or the chat box, happy to stick around and answer them. Again, this session is recorded, So we are going to, we'll redistribute this to attendees and for those folks that couldn't make it today, and you'll have access to this and a recording and slide deck for future reference. But with that, I'll just kind of leave it open for questions and let us know if there's anything that we can answer or kind of go back to from our presentation today.
Ryan, we had a few questions come in during the presentation. So I'm gonna kind of just fire them off and I'll let you all kind of answer them. The first is, tell us what is trending right now with well-being in the workplace. Pat, maybe I'll turn that one over to you, maybe.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for the question. So, what is important right now, if you're looking at it from an employer standpoint, it's how do we get people back into a somewhat normal environment, right? We have to present engaging opportunities for them. You have to give them a reason. And so what many employers are beginning to do is they are beginning to have, they're bringing in free resources so that it helps them feel connected. The other aspect is, making sure that all biases, are removed. So, if someone needs time off because they need to go see a counselor, within your organization, you should consider restructuring your policy around that. You need to think about, allowing them to get the care that they actually need. So that is very, very important. There's a huge focus on that. Also allowing people to have mental holidays, we call them, where they're actually just, hey, you know what? I just need a break. I just need, a day to just really regroup. Those are, big areas. The other thing, as I said earlier, that's become a very, very important aspect because not everyone's in the office. And so you probably do have an office or two that are unoccupied. Make that into your healthy space where employees are able to go there and really enjoy. One, you could actually create a place where they all come together, and they're eating lunch together. And I mean, we have employers that basically are putting, things on the floor like big pillows, and they're actually sitting down and everyone's eating lunch and talking. So those are the type of things right now that are huge and they go a long way. So hopefully that helps.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Pat. Here's a question that I absolutely love. It just came in. So what is the cost of doing nothing?
Well, I can
Maybe you can
start.
jump back in.
Yeah, I'll have Ryan. Ryan, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so I think we all could probably speak to this in some capacity, but I'll give it to you from our perspective. I think the biggest cost of doing nothing, and there are many studies out there that quantify. I know, Pat, you mentioned some statistics in your presentation, but the cost is really losing talent. I think doing nothing ultimately leads to employees feeling, not undervalued, looking to see if the grass is greener elsewhere. And I think we all understand that as professionals in the business world, and especially working alongside executives and HR managers, like turnover is a real thing and it has a real cost associated with it. I mean, in some cases, there are studies that talk about multiples of salary for certain positions in terms of challenges to recruit, replace. If it's a key person in the company, it's even more challenging. And so I think the cost of doing nothing really boils down to you lose good people and the cost to replace them could be different based on the type of company and the type of industry that you're in. But I think it leads to a tremendous amount of stress for you as the HR manager, as the person that now has to eventually replace that person who's left.
And if I can add to that, the employee turnover, many of you are probably have seen SHRM and some of the information on there, but every time that a salaried employee is replaced, it costs an organization 6 to 9 times the a month's salary on the average. So as you can see, I mean, that's a huge amount. The other aspect is, the statistic that I had mentioned during the time that I was presenting, and, it's basically costing employers almost $1,700, per employee per year, or let's look at it from an annual standpoint, it's about almost $226 billion for doing nothing. And the most important thing is, it's about your culture. And I know that all three of us, have touched on that. So if you can incorporate a culture of wellness, I can tell you that you're going to see less diseases within your organization, such as heart disease, cancer, diabetes, arthritis. All of those basically add to our US economy more than $1 trillion annually in healthcare cost. So we can avoid all that by making simple changes, and we're all happy to help you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Another question is, what resources or tools are specifically available to deliver financial wellness programs? So Ryan, I'll direct this one to you from your presentation.
Yeah, there's a wide range, but I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. I think there is financial technology, fintech for short, has advanced greatly, even in the past 5 years. And so as part of that, and to the benefit of many employers, there's tons of resources out there. There are websites that can be utilized either for free or for a fee to offer certain types of education to employees. I think that, for example, 401k providers have gotten really good at trying to offer more than just being a financial institution or a custodian of money. They're also offering additional tools and resources. Some programs and some retirement plans have add-ons that employers can do to help employees. So for example, like managed account services or financial planning services, access to CFPs and other professionals. There's a ton. And so there are too many to mention, but I would say financial planning software, cash flow and budgeting tools, and educational portals are big ones that can be integrated into existing, if you have a company intranet, for example, or if you don't, establishing one to kind of house all of these resources, I think is another piece of the puzzle. So it's not just the access to the resources, but the delivery mechanism as well is important. But there's tons of stuff out there. And I know there are questions a lot of times about costs associated with those things. We have a matrix that we use sometimes in conversation, but there can be things that are totally free to your organization, and there are things that will come at a high cost. And it's just a function of what's important to you. What are the major stresses of your employees? Where do you see areas of or problem areas with your employee group, and how can you address that? And so some of it is in the form of tools and resources. So for example, technology. Some of it is just tweaking certain things in terms of just offering things that have never been offered before that exist, but maybe you just don't know about or are not educated on. So a lot there, but I definitely say that for most companies, it starts at the level of getting educated on what you have. I talked about leveraging existing professionals. Talk to your people today and see what they can offer you. And if it still doesn't feel like enough, there are resources out there. Obviously, we're happy to help, point companies in the right direction as well. So there are tons of things out there. If you have any specific interest on what is available, reach out to one of us. I know Bill talked about some of their tools and resources. We have some that we offer, and I know Pat and her team also has a pretty comprehensive suite of technology and other tools that they roll out to their groups.
Awesome. And I just want to add to that, and then I know that we're right on time, that don't forget, health fairs are huge within organizations, and there's some great free resources that you can actually give to your employees, like Mind Tools, Headspace, workplace strategies for mental health. There's some really great resources out there that are free of cost. And sometimes it's good to just start there and kind of build on it. So again, thank you so much for the opportunities to speak with you today. Ryan, Kevin?
Yeah, we have just one last question. I want to actually give this one to Bill, because I know he talked a lot about this, and it's about connectivity. So can all of this connect together across these platforms, and what's currently trending in the connectivity space among vendors?
Yeah, absolutely, Devin. All of this can connect. And I think I want to take it to just an idea behind accessibility with your employees. Just think real quick about how many different usernames and passwords that your employees have to use to go access health insurance, HSA, 401k, et cetera. There's a number of different benefits. Using systems like single sign-on, where they only have to go to one location to access this information, can really help when it comes to the idea behind wellness and accessing this. Something as simple as eliminating passwords and usernames can go a long way with your employees.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Bill. Well, looks like that's the end of questions. We just want to thank you all so much for spending your lunchtime with us today. We really appreciate it. We hope you got a ton out of this. We're going to follow up with all of you with a recording of the video so you can take it back to whoever you want to watch it. Don't hesitate to reach out to us, and have a great rest of the day. Thanks, Pat, Ryan, and Bill. We appreciate you.